In July of 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, something impossible happened. A woman stepped out into the street and began to dance. Not for celebration, not for music, she simply danced. And she could not stop. Days passed. She kept dancing. Then a second person joined her. Then 10. Then dozens. Then hundreds. People danced through the heat of summer, through exhaustion, through bleeding feet. Some collapsed. Some, according to contemporary records, died. For nearly 2 months, an outbreak of compulsive, involuntary dancing gripped one of the most important cities in the Holy Roman Empire. No one could explain it then. Historians, doctors, and psychologists have been arguing about it ever since. This is not folklore. This is not a rumor. It is one of the strangest, most thoroughly documented mass episodes in human history, and it tells us something profound about what people are capable of when the world becomes unbearable. To understand the dancing plague, you first have to understand Strasbourg in 1518. The city sits on the Rhine River, on the border between what is now France and Germany. In the 16th century, it was one of the most prosperous trading hubs in the Holy Roman Empire, a place of guilds, churches, merchants, and a deeply devout Catholic population. But by 1518, the world around it had become extraordinarily frightening. Famine had gripped the region for years. The previous winter had been harsh, the harvests poor. Hunger was not abstract. People were genuinely starving. On top of this, disease moved freely through the population. Syphilis had swept across Europe. The plague, the Black Death, remained a recurring nightmare. And then there was the financial pressure. Rising taxes, failing harvests, economic dislocation from a rapidly changing trade economy. Strasbourg in 1518 was a city under tremendous and invisible stress. On a day sometime around mid-July 1518, a woman known to history only as Frau Troffea walked out of her house into the streets of Strasbourg and began to dance. We don't know her first name. We know her surname from contemporary chronicles. We know that she danced, alone at first, without music, in a public square. She danced for hours. Then she slept, exhausted on the cobblestones. And when she woke, she began again. Her husband reportedly pleaded with her. She could not explain herself. She may have been unable to stop or unwilling. The records are not clear on what she herself understood about her condition. She was not celebrating. The dancing appeared involuntary, compulsive, almost seizure-like. By the end of the first week, Frau Troffea had been dancing for days without meaningful rest. And then, something far stranger began to happen. Others started dancing too. Within days, the dancing spread. One person became 4. 4 became a dozen. The chronicles of the city, official records, medical accounts, and church documents describe the numbers growing with alarming speed. By some accounts, within a month, more than 400 people were caught in the grip of the same compulsive, uncontrollable movement. They danced in the streets. They danced in the squares. They danced in rows, alone, in clusters. Some wept while they danced. Some laughed. Some appeared vacant, their eyes unfocused, their bodies moving as if operated by some outside force. Witnesses described people dancing until their feet bled, until their shoes fell apart, until they collapsed, and then, when roused, beginning again. The city watched in growing horror. The authorities, the city council, the local bishop, the physicians, were called to respond. What they decided to do next would make everything considerably worse. The City Council of Strasbourg convened to address what was now an obvious public crisis. They consulted physicians. The physicians of 1518 operated largely within the framework of humoral medicine, a system inherited from ancient Greek thought, where illness was understood as an imbalance of 4 bodily fluids. Their dancers were suffering from hot blood. The cure, they reasoned, was to let the dancing run its course. And so the council made a decision that astonishes historians to this day. They opened the guild hall. They hired professional musicians. They cleared space in the market squares. Their logic: If the dancers needed to dance until the energy left their bodies, they should have the proper space and the proper music to do so. It was, in its way, an attempt at compassionate management. It was also, almost certainly, exactly the wrong approach. The music didn't stop the plague, it amplified it. Through August of 1518, the dancing reached its peak. Contemporary accounts describe hundreds of people in motion simultaneously, in designated spaces and spilling out into the streets. The Guildhall throbbed, the squares were packed. Professional musicians played continuously, following the barely coherent movements of the dancers. The city brought in more musicians. It arranged for the dancers to be accompanied, supervised, managed. Some accounts mention that Saint Vitus and Saint John were invoked. These were patron saints associated, in folk belief, with dancing madness. The city may have organized processions to shrines of these saints in hopes of a cure. The spectacle attracted onlookers from surrounding villages, and some of those onlookers, witnesses reported, joined in. The plague was, in a very modern-sounding sense, contagious. Not through bacteria or virus, through something far harder to quantify. Through seeing it happen. The human cost was real. Contemporary sources, city records, medical accounts, and chronicles from the period describe people dying. The exact numbers are uncertain. Some accounts claim dozens of deaths. Others say 15 people died per day at the plague's height. The causes were consistent with extreme physical exertion, heart failure, stroke, dehydration, exhaustion. People literally danced themselves to death. Their bodies gave out before their compulsion did. The survivors often emerged with injuries, torn ligaments, broken feet, damaged joints. Many had no clear memory of their dancing, or described it as something that had happened to them rather than something they had done. They did not understand why. Some were deeply ashamed. The dancing was a crisis. But understanding what kind of crisis, that would take another 500 years. Historians and scientists have proposed several explanations for the dancing plague, and none of them are completely satisfying. The first class of theories focuses on physical causes. The most prominent is ergotism. Ergot is a fungus, Claviceps purpurea, that grows on rye and other grains, particularly in wet conditions. When contaminated grain is ground into flour and consumed, it can cause a severe illness characterized by hallucinations, muscle convulsions, spasms, and powerful involuntary movements. Ergotism had a long and documented history in medieval Europe. It was often called St. Anthony's fire because of the burning sensations in the limbs. Outbreaks were most common in poor communities dependent on rye bread, exactly the population most vulnerable in famine-stricken Strasbourg. The ergotism hypothesis has real appeal, but it struggles with a crucial problem. Ergotism produces convulsions, not coordinated movement. The dancers in 1518 were moving, specifically rhythmically, repeatedly. That distinction matters. The more compelling modern explanation belongs to the field of psychosomatic medicine. Researchers, most notably historian John Waller, who wrote extensively on the dancing plague, have argued that what happened in Strasbourg in 1518 was a case of mass psychogenic illness. What was once called mass hysteria, though that term has largely been retired from scientific use. Mass psychogenic illness is a documented phenomenon. It occurs when groups of people, under conditions of extreme psychological stress, begin to manifest shared physical symptoms that have no organic cause. The symptoms are real, genuinely experienced, not performed, not faked. But they emerge from psychological and social processes rather than from a biological pathogen. The conditions in Strasbourg were, as we've seen, extreme. Famine, disease, economic collapse, crushing religious anxiety in an age when the wrath of God was understood as literal and immediate. Into that pressure, one person began to dance, and others followed. The mechanics of mass psychogenic illness are now reasonably well understood. Episodes typically begin with a single index case, one person who exhibits a behavior or symptom that is culturally legible, meaning it fits into the community's existing framework of how the world works. In Strasbourg, dancing as divine punishment or divine possession was not a foreign concept. St. Vitus was specifically associated with cursed compulsive dancing. It was a known thing, a thing you could be struck with. When others see the behavior, some of them, particularly those under similar stress, in close proximity, and psychologically primed by the same fears, begin to exhibit it too. This is not conscious imitation. It operates below the level of deliberate choice. The brain, under severe stress, can produce involuntary movement. The body, under certain psychological conditions, genuinely cannot stop itself. And crucially, the City Council's decision to provide music and space did not treat the illness. It validated it. It told the dancers and everyone watching that this was real, it was happening, and it required management. The dancing plague of 1518 was not the first of its kind. In 1374, a massive dancing epidemic swept through towns along the Rhine, through Aachen, Cologne, Metz, and Strasbourg itself. Thousands participated. Contemporary accounts describe the same compulsive, uncontrollable movement, the same inability to stop, the same mix of religious terror and physical collapse. Even earlier, in 1237, children in the German town of Erfurt reportedly danced compulsively to a neighboring town before collapsing in exhaustion. Some historians have suggested this event, and others like it, may be among the real origins of the Pied Piper legend. Dancing plagues appear throughout late medieval and early Renaissance Europe. They cluster in times of social stress, harvest failure, and epidemic disease. They appear most often in communities that share a specific cultural framework for dancing as punishment or possession. Then, sometime around September of 1518, the dancing in Strasbourg simply stopped. We don't know exactly why. The dancing plague ended. The records go quiet. The city returned to its ordinary anxieties. The dancers were never held accountable. There were no criminal proceedings. The city, in its way, understood that something extraordinary and involuntary had happened, even if it could not name it. What the dancing plague of 1518 tells us is not primarily about the 16th century. It tells us about the limits of individual control over the human body and mind when social structures begin to collapse. It tells us how susceptible human beings are to contagion, not just of disease, but of behavior, of fear, of physical response. It tells us that the human nervous system, under sufficient pressure, will do things that seem inexplicable, and that communities under the same pressure will respond in ways that make things worse. 500 years on, the dancing plague is over. But the conditions that produced it, anxiety, scarcity, social rupture, invisible pressure, those remain very much with us. The question the people of 1518 couldn't answer is one we're still asking. When the world becomes unbearable, what do our bodies do next?